I'd like to call this meeting to order. Could you please stand and salute the flag with me? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Are there any changes to the agenda?
I have none.
Do I have council's approval for the agenda?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been made a motion by Councilman Horn and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Singleton to approve of the agenda. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Horn,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Singleton,
Aye.
Councilman Ramirez is absent. Councilman Atkinson,
Aye.
Mayor Ramsey.
I also vote aye. Okay, motion carried. Okay, we go to number 2, awards, presentations, appointments, and proclamations. Number 1 is active transportation overview and update on implementation. Sean?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
You can? I think Larry is going to load up there we go. Now it sounds a lot better now. So this was a request, well, it's kind of a discussion that staff had at a council meeting regarding kind of sidewalks, active transportation. And so staff put together kind of an updated presentation to discuss some of the implementation that we've been doing with our active transportation plan. And so we want to give a little update on what the plan is, and then kind of go through some of the projects that are in the works in terms of what we're doing to implement this plan that we have put in place. So the active transportation plan envisions a network that supports walking and biking for both transportation and recreation, where residents of all ages and ability can choose to walk and bike. So it identifies improvements for crossing and navigating busy roadways, improving connections between local neighborhoods, parks, schools, shopping, restaurants, employment, religious institutions, and other social activity centers. So the plan builds like a blueprint for offering alternative transportation sources, create safer streets, improve public health, generate economic development, and meet community needs. And so we've set a vision for the active transportation plan, as well as the goals that we do to implement on the implementation side. So the vision is that the city of Coalinga envisions an environment that supports people of all ages and abilities to comfortability and safely access jobs, schools, recreation, and shopping by foot or on bicycle as a part of daily life. And so with the goals, we've identified 4 goals is to prioritize safety, design active transportation projects that are accessible and comfortable for people of all ages, identify and work to implement and complete a convenient active transportation network, and increase awareness and support of walking and biking through education, encouragement, and evaluation programs. So in terms of prioritization criteria, this is where we start when we start developing grant applications and different projects to look at throughout the city. These are kind of the prioritization criteria we look at when we start establishing projects. 1, connectivity. That's a huge factor in a lot of our applications. In terms of connecting those areas where we have no sidewalk, for instance, we're trying to connect those areas, and that's what we're doing on this big active transportation project that's currently under construction around the schools and the surrounding neighborhoods. Where you're seeing a lot of installation of curb ramps and sidewalks. Also safety, that's another big one. That's where you saw a lot of bulb outs and a lot of other safety improvements that we're doing along these corridors to enhance walkability. Ease of implementation, projects that we can deliver quickly, not projects that take years and years and years. The challenge, like with our trail projects, they take a little longer than putting in sidewalk, doing curb ramps, doing bulb outs, bike lanes, those types of projects. Also a community identified need. So based on whether the project is located in a challenging area as identified by the public, as well as the public input that was provided during the development of the plan. And then these criteria will be used to score projects and help determine how to best prioritize these projects. And these are projects that we look at through the Active Transportation Grant Program. And so this is a kind of an exhibit. These documents, we have the entire Active Transportation Plan is available on our website, but this is kind of a large scale project of all the future improvements that we've looked at from the comprehensive analysis that was done in the ATP. So it has crosswalk improvements, sidewalk improvements, school site improvements, spot improvements, curb ramps, curb extensions, pedestrian refuge islands, and additional signage as well. And then we also have some future studies that were identified and looked at in the plan, where we looked at stop control, intersection improvements, and we call RRFBs, our reflective rapid flashing beacons. So in terms of as incorporated in this Active Transportation Plan is the ADA transition plan, which we completed in 2013. And this basically looked at all of the sidewalks, the curb ramps, curb line, bike lanes, in terms of ensuring that we have proper ADA accessibility throughout the town. And so as you can see, 110 or 11% of curb ramps were found to be in compliance with the ADA requirements. Curb ramps were missing in 288 or 28% of locations, and 624 or 61% had existing curb ramps, but they weren't ADA compliant. So when we look at prioritization, we're looking at areas that don't have curb ramps. That's why you're seeing a lot of areas right now west of the school, and then we're looking south of the school towards Keck Park, where we're placing a significant amount of curb ramps right now in those areas. And like curb ramps, sidewalks were also evaluated in the ADA compliance plan in 2013, and 46,790 feet of sidewalks were found to be missing or non-compliant. So this has been a huge priority in terms of our future projects, is to look at putting sidewalk where we don't have sidewalk. And these have been established through ATP and other projects that are eligible for this type of funding. And so with this ADA transition plan, we will be doing another ADA transition plan in the near future, but we are going to be waiting until we do finish our ATP projects that we're currently working on, so then we have an inventory to work off of and see where our successes have been since then. And so in terms of recommendations that came out of the plan, we're looking at sidewalks, spot improvements, bikeways, trails, bike parking, and other types of projects like wayfinding and trail crossings. In terms of pedestrian improvements, the spot improvements basically are looking at curb ramps, pedestrian refuge islands, and then some of the future studies are crossings with RFBs, certain hotspot intersection improvements, pathway crossings, which we look at when we're developing and designing the trail system, stop controls, and then also traffic calming measures. So this is an example of a pedestrian refuge island. These are some types of improvements that we'll see when the Complete Streets Elm Avenue project is completed in conjunction with Caltrans. Because of the large right-of-way width, the pedestrian refuge island allows you to safely cross half the roadway and then safely cross the second half of the roadway. In terms of bikeway projects, this kind of gives you an idea of what different types of different bikeway classifications are in terms of class 1, 2, and 3, in terms of what those actually represent. And then the future studies when it comes to bikeway is just continuing to coordinate with Caltrans, because we do have a lot of highway that comes through the city. And so in coordinating with them on future projects and making sure that we're collaborating collectively on those projects. So another big component of this master plan, or of this active transportation plan, was the development of a trails master plan. This is something that was actually in development prior to my arrival. And so this is something we were able to finally implement into a plan, and through grant funds, we've been able to secure funding for almost half of the actual trail system. It will take some time to get through that process due to the CEQA requirements, the Environmental Quality Act requirements, and the additional time for design and construction in some of these sensitive areas. So I think we have some examples of some of the trail segments. This is the trail segment that was already constructed in front of the new West Hills College District office. It typically has a shared use path with decomposed granite shoulders. We may not see landscaping in all of these locations, because landscaping is a significant maintenance, a lot of maintenance, and of course the use of a lot of water. And so this is kind of a cross section of how that path looks. This is pretty much what was implemented for the West Hills College area, but we will continue to look at costs as we go to different locations. And it all depends on how much room we have as well in terms of right-of-way. This is an example of segment 5. I think I have, yeah, so this is kind of what it would look like. I think this segment is somewhere near past the walking beam, but you can see where basically it uses the contours of the environment to go ahead to install that trail with a 10-foot shared use path with shoulder walking path and then a 2-foot shoulder on the other side. And this is kind of a before and kind of after of what it would create. We do have two segments that go through the Chrpd Sports Complex, segment 13 and 14. We have been in continuous conversation in the last few years with the Parks District in terms of developing these segments. And as you can see, we have some examples, and in the master plan, you can see these a little bit bigger as well. And in terms of some of the specific study areas, two of the major study areas, one that we've semi-implemented, which is this Forest and Elm, or Truman and Elm, as you come in kind of at a weird angle. The completion of that will come when Caltrans does the complete streets improvements, because then, and you'll see on this, I think I have the exhibit on here that you'll be able to see what it looks like with the 3-lane configuration rather than right now we still have the 4-lane configuration. So one of the big concepts is the travel lane reconfiguration. And there's a lot of considerations and benefits from a 4 to a 3, what they call a 4-3 conversion, or complete streets, or what they call road diet. Typically these can handle up to traffic volumes of 20,000, up to 20,000. Currently our record, what they call ADT, or average daily traffic on Elm Avenue, is about 12,000. That's kind of stayed pretty stagnant over the years. I know this is the 2015 number, but that number is pretty, still about right there. And a couple of the benefits, and we'll go into some other details as well, is that up to 47% reduction in crashes in small town context, and up to 30% observed reduction in speeding, which is a huge impact and a huge benefit to the road diet concept. So what it does is it goes from 4 lanes to 3 lanes, and there are some questions there related to which road carries more traffic, and that kind of goes back to how much traffic these road diets can handle, which road produces the highest rate of speed, which road produces the highest crash rate, and which is better for bicyclists, pedestrians, and businesses. And I think we know the answers to all of those. And it talks about, there's some statistics regarding speed levels and in the survival rate of a pedestrian accident. So you can see the potential death rate of a pedestrian hit by a vehicle at certain speeds and how much it drastically drops as the speed drops. This is another example of what you see when you're at a certain miles per hour. And I think that what a road diet and what a reduction in lanes does is it creates more of a sense of place, and you're actually able to see your environment better as you're driving, where at 30 miles an hour, this is about what you can see, which currently people are driving between 35 and 40, and in certain instances faster. So that circle, as you can imagine, will be smaller. But at 15 miles an hour, which is not necessarily where people are going to be at, but they're going to be significantly, their speed is going to be significantly lowered. And so these are a few examples of what occurs on 4 lanes compared to 3 lanes. And I almost experienced one just yesterday pulling out because someone was passing someone else, and I'll show you that example. But it prevents and it helps reduce rear ends when people are turning. People aren't paying attention and hit. In terms of the 3 lane, there's a center turn lane for these people to get over, and they're turning. Side swipes are the same. When they're turning, someone gets over extremely quick and hits that other person. So in the same instance, you're seeing that you have that center turn lane for those folks turning to get in. And then the broadsides, those are also instances where the person on the right does not see the vehicle turning left into the business, and there's a collision in that lane. So this is kind of the existing configuration of Elm Avenue. This is what was provided as an example in the active transportation plan. However, this segment of Elm will be coming later, as 5th Street to the north is where the improvements are going to occur on Elm Avenue. And going from basically from 4 lanes to 3 lanes, it provides a 7-foot parking strip with a 5-foot buffered bike lane, with an 11-foot, 10-foot, or 2 11-foot travel lanes, a 10-foot center turn lane, and then you have the same on the other side with your bike lane, your parking, and your buffered lane between the bikes and your vehicles. And this kind of gives you an example of what Elm is. I think that's the old courthouse right there on the right, and what it would do to transform Elm Avenue once it's completed. And a lot of this is striping. There are some other improvements that'll be included, but a lot of it is going to be a striping exercise for a lot of this. And this is the other Elm and Truman, which is existing, and these are some of the improvements that were implemented as part of the Forest and Truman project. However, now you have that center turn lane with a dedicated turn lane for vehicles to make that left-hand turn and to continue the flow of traffic down Elm Avenue. So with that, that's what I have. So any questions you guys have?
Any questions?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. The section that's right there in front of the theater, the bar, the old courthouse, is that like a test section that you guys are going to do first?
No, so that was actually that was where they did their concept, at least for the exhibit. But with Caltrans moving forward with their Complete Streets project, it's going to be from 5th to Cambridge on Elm Avenue. So we'll be working with Caltrans for future funds to look at from 5th to Polk Street.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at completing that because it will go back to that 4-lane configuration there. But Caltrans' focus was Highway 33. And as we know, Highway 188 continues south on right there on Elm Avenue when you pass 5th Street in front of the movie theater and the courthouse.
All right. Another question. The trail, one of the pictures that you were showing, is that the dirt road that goes up to the railroad bridge? Is that getting fixed too on the trail system?
So that is part of the trail system. But that is one area we will have to do a lot of analysis on before we submit for grant funds, because there's a lot of unknowns from a structural standpoint, from whether, there's a lot of contingencies as to how we handle that, because it's on private property. So it's one of those things where the city would have to go through the right-of-way process under some type of federal grant fund.
Right.
So there's a lot of initial studies that will have to be done to analyze how we go about what kind of rehab would need to be done to that the walking beam, not the walking beam, the bridge, the trestle bridge.
And then the last question is, are there going to be any water stations anywhere on that trail system?
We haven't gotten to that point yet in terms of adding water stations. Probably not. We're looking at our goal right now, because the cost of trying to just get the network in place is our goal is to get the full network in place, and then start looking at future amenities for that trail system as we move along. So we feel that the funding is better used to complete the network and create a circular network, and then add the amenities afterwards. So we'll try to get to the point where we have signage, and we have other types of maybe exercise equipment along the trail, or look at water stations or other trash receptacles.
Like how
those types of
Keck
things.
Park used to have all the different stations along the sidewalk.
Yeah. So there's definitely some opportunities for additional amenities that we'll continue to look at once we get that network, and then we can expand on that trail system.
All right.
Any other questions from council? Okay, do you have an idea when Elm Street might get started? I know it's going to be
I think they're right now you'll probably see some Caltrans survey crews out there, but Elm Street's probably a couple years out.
A couple of years, because a lot of people have heard about this, and then I know the council knows about it a little bit, but it hasn't really got out there that much about the going to 3 lanes from 4 to 4 lanes, and I just wanted to see if it's out there, and if we could maybe get some pictures in the paper of this, too, so they know it's coming.
Yeah, what we can do is, we can definitely reach out, and we can also, as Caltrans gets to more of a design level of the project, we can try to get some, preliminary designs out, at least to kind of see what we're going to see out there.
Okay. Well, thank you. We don't vote on this one. This is just information only.
All right. Thanks,
Do you
guys.
have anything, Adam?
Sorry, I got nothing. Thank you,
Okay,
though.
thank you. Okay, next we'll go to presentation of Farm Workforce Modernization Act by Manuel Kunda. How are you doing, Manuel?
Fine. Good evening, Mayor and council members and staff. Thank you very much. My name is Manuel Cunha. I'm president of Nisei Farmers League, also Insure America, which is an immigration organization that the Nisei Farmers League put together in 1986 when the Immigration Reform and Control Act under Reagan went into effect. So the Nisei Farmers League set up an immigration office, and we were the largest office in the United States. We did 241,000 green cards, and we actually issued green cards out of our office for a lot of the people in Fresno, throughout the San Joaquin Valley, and many others. So immigration is a big issue to our organization. Again, I want to thank you for allowing me to... Oh. Okay. Okay, yeah, right. Okay.
On a milk carton.
Yeah, that would even be dangerous. So tonight I'm here to ask for your support as a council as well as the mayor or individuals for an immigration bill that is sitting in the Senate. The House of Representatives passed the Agricultural Farm Worker Modernization Act this January, February, went over to the Senate, and in that discussion, the president made it very clear that he wanted 2 immigration bills on his desk this year. He wanted the agricultural immigration issue because it's been for 30 years. And the second was a thing called Dreamers, DACA, many of the DACA kids. So when the Modernization Act went over to the Senate, the House went ahead and did a real slim definition of agriculture. What is agriculture? And agriculture, like under the 86 law, includes packing houses, processing, cotton gins. All of those are agriculture. They only included in the Modernization Act on the House side, we had 33 Republicans and 230 Democrats that signed on to the bill, is that now we've got to take and complete the definition the right way so that packing houses, processing, and all of those are in the immigration bill definition of agriculture. If not, it will only legalize the worker in the field. But what happens to the wife or the husband that are working in the packing house? They're not legalized. They don't get a temporary card, and eventually they go to permanent residence and then have the ability to go to citizenship. That's the immigration policy. That's the law, the regulations. So what we're trying to do is get Senator Feinstein and Padilla to take and modify the definition to include agricultural packing houses, processing, and cotton gins and those things. So to do that, we're going throughout the San Joaquin Valley, getting many of the cities. I will be going to King City, Gonzales, and Gilroy over in that area to pick up some of those farm communities. It's very important to our farm families, and once and for all, we've got to stop separating families. We cannot have moms or dads not knowing if they're going to go home tonight or not, or they're going to be hauled off because of ICE audits. So this is very important to our rural communities, tremendously, well, to all cities, but especially to the San Joaquin Valley. It's big. So the senators both said if we can get support and let people see and for them to understand the importance of how packing houses fit into agriculture, they absolutely want to do this. And especially Senator Feinstein, she has been a real champion after immigration for the 30-some years that we've been at this. So, and then Dreamers is the other part that was done, and we want Dreamers finally completed. Give these give these young adults and little ones, kids under the age of 18, but mostly of them above, a temporary to a permanent resident alien card. Because now they have to do it every 2 years Depending on the administration, it could be on or it could be off. And they have a social security card. They work in our industries. They work in hospitals even. They even work in banks. They work in agriculture. So they are an important part as well. So 2 separate bills, we support both of them. The Dreamers, getting them complete for once and for all, but definitely the agricultural definition. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. And
Any questions?
okay, thank you very much, Mayor.
Okay, thank
Appreciate
you.
it very much.
Thank you very much. Well, we have it in our, it's coming up in our other parts. Next, we'll go to citizens' comments. This section of the agenda allows members of the public to address the city council on any item within the jurisdiction of the council. Members of the public, when recognized by the mayor, should come forward to the lectern, identify themselves, and use their microphone. Comments are normally limited to 3 minutes. In accordance with state open meeting laws, no action will be taken by the city council this evening, and all items will be referred to staff for a follow-up. Citizens' comments submitted in writing to the city clerk by 5 o'clock on the day of the city council meeting shall be distributed to the city council and included in the record. However, they will not be read. Is there anybody that would like to address the council? Okay.
Good evening, guys.
Could you state your name just?
Robin
just
Scott.
rapidly? Thank you.
Hi. I have 2 things I wanted to bring up. One is, it would be really nice if you guys would reinstate the second section of public comments, because sometimes when you guys are done, we have a couple of questions, maybe not pertaining to anything that you guys have gone over. And so sometimes we'll come to you guys to bring it up, but you guys, if you're going into a closed session, you're not always available. And so last city council meeting, we actually, a couple of us had a couple questions, but we weren't able to ask. And so if you guys would just give that some consideration for the second section of public comments, not necessarily for anything that has been decided upon that evening. The second, not really issue, is actually I'm going to ask Sean. Hi. The project that you were just talking about, I know you mentioned that it was including some of the school areas. So over on Cambridge by Bishop, it's a madhouse in the morning. There's 2 crosswalks, one that is crossing Sunset and the other is crossing California.
The backside, that's California.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of cars in the morning. There is PD presence. It doesn't seem to, some of those drivers don't seem to care, but our concern is the kids, because of the parking, you're having to park on the sports complex side of Cambridge. There's a lot of people that are just walking across the street because there's no middle crosswalk. And I was wondering if there's if we could look into maybe putting another crosswalk that goes from the sports complex side to like the middle gate there by the kindergarten area of Bishop.
Actually, that was on my mind just yesterday.
Really?
There, because I know that there is more pickup and drop off being done at that location.
Yes.
In the past it hadn't.
Right. And that has a lot to do with the school's policies right now.
Yeah, so it's definitely a different, I mean, it's something that's on our radar to look at.
Okay.
I mean, we're always constantly looking at ways to improve.
Okay.
safety.
The other thing is like right there by where there's some kind of pipes. I'm not sure what it's for, if it's for water or whatever, but in that area there on the Bishop side of Cambridge, down to Sunset, there's a very large area that's marked red.
That's being changed as well.
Thank you. That's all I wanted. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else? Okay, with none there, we'll go to public hearings, which we have none. Next, we go to consent calendar. Number 1 is, approve the minutes of September 2nd, 2021. Number 2, authorize the mayor to sign and send a letter of support for the Farm Workforce Modernization Act of 2021 on behalf of the city of Coalinga. Number 3, consideration and approval of bid award for the Fresno Street Rehabilitation. Number 4, approve the use of rubberized tree wells as an alternative approach to the use of conventional tree wells for street trees. Number 5, council update related to installing benches throughout the city. Number 6, approve contract amendment with IGS Services to allow subcontractor work subject to city manager's approval and further approving a task order to perform gas molding services. Number 7, adopt resolution 4045 supporting the implementing of timely use funding as required by AB 1012 for candidate Federal Transportation Act Cycle 3 projects, STBG and CMAQ. Number 8, approve task order with Bias and Associates to develop a grant application under the Bureau of Reclamation and Water Smart and Energy Efficient grant programs. Number 9, authorize the city manager to execute a contract amended with SWCA Environmental Consultants to provide environmental services related to Master Trails Project, APT Cycle 4 grant program. Number 10, adopt airport hangar inspection policy for new Kalinga Airport. Number 11, Public Works, Utilities, Community and Development Monthly Report for August 2021. Is there any ones you'd like to pull? Okay, I'd like to pull the number 2.
I'd like to pull 5.2. I mean, sorry, 5.10.
Oh, 510? Oh, 510. Okay, do you have any, Al? Do you have any?
I don't have any. Thank you for asking, though, Mayor.
Okay, yeah. I so didn't want to miss you. Okay, the reason I wanted to pull number 2 is we have a gentleman here that just talked to us about it, and would you like to say any more at all about this program?
Just thank you for doing this very much.
Okay. I am in support of this for the workforce program. I read what you wanted to put on the letter and everything, and it all sounds really good. So, thank you. Anybody else on that one? Okay, number 10, airport hangar inspection policy. Go ahead.
I was just reading through this. This is for Mercedes. Who's going to be doing the inspections, and how often are the inspections going to be done, and are they going to be random?
The inspections, I would be doing them along, and it would be once a year annually. I included the inspection sheet, and they wouldn't be random. In the policy and procedures, we'll send a letter out to the hangar leasee, letting them know that we would be going in to do the inspection, and if we see any violations related to the inspection sheet, that way they would be notified. If they want to be present during the time of the inspection, they would have the notice.
But all are they allowed to store there besides the airplane and their fuel?
The
and
airplane, their
little supplies?
fuel, they can store light items if they're doing maintenance. They would be able to store a vehicle if they're out flying their aircraft. Since we don't have a taxi service or Uber services, if they land their airplane and they are going to be out and about, they can have a vehicle in there. And this is in accordance to the FAA, as you know, it has been reported that some of our hangars may be used for non-aeronautical use. So this is one of the first steps in implementing this in accordance with the FAA wants. And then we would take steps to evict anyone that, or have them vacate the hangar if it's not
Are
used
they
for
going to receive
aeronautical
a
use.
warning notice first and then an eviction?
If they're in violation of the inspection sheet, they would receive a notice. They have 30 days to correct it. If they don't correct it, then we would take steps. And in the policies and procedures, they can make an appeal with the city manager, and then we would take steps from there.
All right. When will this start?
It's supposed to be 45 days from once it's adopted. So if it's adopted tonight, the letters will go out next week. And the reason I chose this time frame is usually the end of November, early December, the city, Fresno County Assessor's Office comes out and assesses the aircrafts that are out in the hangar. So if we could coincide it at that same time, it would be less intrusive to our lessees.
Thank you.
Did you have a question, Councilman Atkinson?
I just wanted to talk about how in the years past we've had some issues with people using their hangars for car storage, basically, and I want to make sure that we are able to get away from that and make sure that it's strictly used for airplanes. Obviously, if people are out flying, they need a place to store their car. I'm not saying that shouldn't be allowed, but I want to make sure that it's strictly for airplane storage and nothing else.
Yes, and as I mentioned, this is one of our first steps to ensuring that. And with the checklist that's on there, we do have permitted uses, and if they're complying by that, and then safety inspection.
Perfect. Thank you, Mercedes.
You're welcome.
Mercedes, the question I have is, if you give them the letter and everything, how are you going to check them if they don't show up?
We have the master keys to the hangars. If they have installed another lock, they are supposed to provide us with the key so we can go in at any time. It does say in their lease, if we suspect anything going on that is not aeronautical use, or maybe someone is living in their hangar, which they should not be, we do have the authority to enter as the property owner, but this is just the first step of notifying everyone, since this has not been in place previously.
So technically, we can go in there at any time we want to check on something if we needed to.
Yes, if it was brought to our attention for a safety concern or a violation of the lease, we could.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we had that too. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions?
I got one more quick question. Is there cameras out there?
No.
Are we going to be putting some cameras out there so we can, because there's nobody there during the afternoon and evening anyways. So just a third eye.
We do have someone renting the private residence portion of the pilot's lounge. So they are out there, not specific hours, but there is another set of eyes out there. But installing
Are they caretakers or just people just living there?
they're on site to provide guidance to air pilots that have come in that maybe are stranded or don't have a phone, if they're available for that, but not caretaking the airport.
We have some runway stuff that needs to be done first.
Yeah.
Then we can-
Yeah, we have some grant money that we can look at, but we need to get our runways done and stuff first because they're really bad shape. But we do have grant money, so we could look at the grant monies later on to see if we can get some cameras in there. So, right. So it would be good for the police department to have one there too. So,
Councilmember Horn, that's something I can research with the FAA. At the previous meeting, the council had approved our request for qualifications. Once we get airport consultant on board, they can work with us and the FAA to see if that's an allowable expense that could be covered by those grant funds.
thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Okay, do I have a motion to accept the consent calendar or with any changes or anything?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar as it is.
I'll second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded to accept the consent calendar. Roll call, please.
Councilman Horn,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Singleton,
Aye.
Councilman Atkinson,
Aye.
and Mayor Ramsey.
I also vote aye. Okay, we'll go to ordinance number 6, ordinance presentation and discussion and potential action items. Council review and consideration of the engineer's report and direction related to the rehabilitation of the Derrick Reservoir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As Larry gets the presentation ready, and I'll invite Henry up to the podium. Tonight, staff's recommending that the council receive and accept the engineer's report by NKN and discuss and provide direction to staff related to the next steps based on recommendations for the rehab of the Derrick Reservoir. So back in May, the council approved a task order with MKN to prepare a preliminary engineering report, including recommendations, evaluation of 2 roof replacement alternatives, and associated cost estimates in order to guide the next phase of the project, which will include choosing the method in which the city will proceed with rehab and subsequently begin preliminary design and preparing the project specifications. So the report was completed in early September, and staff attached the report for council's review. So over the course of the last 4 months, MKN has been developing the preliminary engineer's report related to the rehab of the 7.5 million gallon water storage tank. So staff, in conjunction with MKN, will be presenting the findings to the council tonight in order to receive feedback and direction on the next steps to rehabilitate the tank. So we have Henry Lang from MKN and Associates to provide an overview and a summary of the report for council, and then we'll have a few just kind of discussion items in terms of the recommendations that staff has and looking for concurrence with the council or engage in any kind of additional discussion with the council moving forward to get this project in the next steps.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sean. Does this work here?
It should be on, and I think you just,
Perfect.
there you go.
All right. All right, good evening, Mayor, council members, staff. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and present some of the work that we've been working on for the rehabilitation of Derrick Reservoir. We recognize it's a critical asset for the city, and we also understand that the city is constrained in resources that are available to be able to rehab the tank. And, you know, in an ideal world, we would just build a brand new tank and replace it, but that's really not realistic and practical. So we feel like we've really identified some ways to really maximize the remaining life and extend the remaining life of the reservoir. So with that, I'm going to just jump into our presentation, and there'll be some time after for questions as well. But feel free to interrupt if we're on a slide and you have a question on it, because you might have something that's just burning inside of you, and I'd rather address your question right on the spot. So first off, just to give you a little background and context, the existing reservoir was built in 1971. So you can do some quick math, it's already 50 years old. And with that, during the time it was built as a welded steel tank, which is basically sheets of steel that are welded together. And it's a pretty large tank, you know, on the scale of water tanks, 7.5 million gallons is pretty significant. It's probably on the higher end of the spectrum in terms of welded steel tanks. So we have that sitting out on the western end of the city. So as I mentioned earlier, it's steel sheets that were welded together, and it's basically 5 courses. So we kind of labeled the 5 courses, and if you go up closer to the tank, you can see the seams. So it's 5 courses that are 8 foot tall each, and that basically creates a total height of a little over 40 feet, and it's a 180 foot diameter reservoir. So I'm sure you've all seen it, and it's a pretty significant facility that's sitting out there. And it's a lot of steel that's sitting out there that over time, you know, corrodes and wears. So the current overflow, which is basically the maximum water level that can rise in the tank, is 40 feet. Once it goes over 40 feet, the water will spill into an overflow pipe, and that water will basically be lost. So I mentioned that because that's a really important number, and I'll come back to why later in this presentation. So let's talk about some of the issues. So we worked with a couple of our teaming partners, a structural engineering firm and also a coatings firm, to look at this tank in detail. So a lot of the issues are really with the coating. It's experienced, you know, the steel has basically experienced advanced corrosion. If you look at some of the pictures, these are actual pictures of the tank, and you can see the coating has worn over time, which is natural, and once that happens, the steel starts to corrode. So there's a lot of areas where you see that. There's also major chalking. Most of you have probably seen steel pipe or steel tanks. You know, over time, that coating starts to chalk. And it's not that it's necessarily an issue that's chalking, but that's just a sign that the coating is starting to age and fail. There's also gunfire damage. So there's actually bullet dents on the tank. And you can imagine it's a major target out there, and I guess people have decided to fire at it over the years. But as far as we understand, that has never caused a leak or anything that we know of. Now, the biggest issue with the coatings is that it has high metal concentration. So we grabbed samples of the coating and had that tested, and we ran some testing that basically showed the coating, you know, it's 50 years old or 30 years old, whenever it was recoated. And that coating that was used back in the day, you know, that's when there weren't as strict of regulations, so the materials used contained heavy metal content, which today is not allowed. But what that means is that to be able to recoat the tank, we have to remove the existing coating, and there's a lot of other mitigation measures that have to be taken, like tinting the tank or measures like that, like you would when you fumigate a house, just because that's needed to be able to protect the environment and also protect the workers as they're working on the tank. So as I mentioned earlier, the high metals was common back in the day, but now it's no longer, you know, those old coating systems are not allowed. So the other aspect that we looked at was structural and the appurtenances, which is the appurtenances would be kind of like the piping and valve connections. So the structural is really the biggest issue. So the tank shell courses at their current operating level, which is about 35 feet, it's overstressed. And the reason it's overstressed is because this tank was designed in 1971. And seismic codes for tank designs really didn't go into effect until 1978. So, you know, the engineers that designed this tank, I mean, the tank's still standing today. So it obviously was designed well, but from a design code standpoint, it does not meet today's seismic codes, which makes sense, right? It was designed 50 years ago.
I got a quick question for
Yeah.
you. On you saying it doesn't meet current seismic codes, what's the thickness of the wall thickness on the base versus the top? Is it a tapered or is it all one?
It's tapered.
Okay.
So the bottom course is the thickest, and then it reduces as you get higher. And our report has the actual thicknesses. I just don't remember them offhand. But that's
Now some of the spots that are surface, of course, that one was a surface rust. The pitted ones, are they going to actually be removing it, or are they going to actually fill it in, patch it, and then coat it, or just
Yeah.
recoat it?
So the steel itself is in good shape. So there's areas where that corrosion has occurred. It's all on the surface. So in all the testing that we did the thickness testing, we confirmed that the steel itself is in good shape.
Okay.
It's just that it's not thick enough for today's seismic design criteria.
What's the coating that they're put on? How many? What's the life on it?
It's the coating that we would recommend is probably a 50-year life. It's a 50-year system. Yep. Okay. So seismically, the existing reservoir is deficient, and the roof system is also in really poor shape. So inside the roof, inside the reservoir, right under the roof are these rafters. And yeah, we think we do have pictures. It might be kind of hard to see, but the rafters are in really poor condition. They're subject to failing. And this bottom right picture is a picture of the roof. It might be kind of hard to tell, but that's actually a hole, like literally a hole that you could stick your hand through. And there's a lot of that around the perimeter of the reservoir. So that tank is really, is the roof especially is the worst aspect of the reservoir. I mean, it's kind of dangerously deficient. So that's the biggest issue. And the appurtenances are deficient as well. And I'll talk about some of the reasons why later. I have a little better slide to show why it's deficient. So here's what we recommend, or first off, we looked at 5 alternatives. So here's the 5. The first one is to basically keep the existing reservoir as is, not modifying its height or redoing its shell or anything, but basically taking care of some other improvements and associated with replacing the roof, replacing some of the pipe connections, recoating, and basically reducing the water operating level. So when I said that the reservoir is deficient, that's when it's being operated at 35 feet. If that level can be reduced to 29 feet, then it actually would meet all of the seismic criteria. It would not overstress the tank if it was reduced at a lower level. So that's alternative number 1. And we have in our report a detailed summary of what all those improvements include, and it's basically a $3.2 million project. So that's alternative 1. Alternative 2 would be if the city really needs more storage. If we can't live with operating the reservoir at 29 feet, we need that 35 feet of that additional 6 feet of water. Then what we would recommend is retrofitting the lower 2 shell courses. And we would basically, there's a variety of ways we could do it. And our report covers 3 different methods. But we would basically retrofit that the lower 2 shell courses to strengthen that. And then if we were able to do that, we could operate the tank at a higher water level. And that would basically be the same improvements as alternative 1 with the coating, the recoating, the roof replacement, and redoing the appurtenances, but we would also retrofit the lower 2 shell courses, and that's a nearly $5 million project.
Is that replacing the 2 rings,
No.
or is that just fixing them?
Beefing them up.
So you're just gonna put a skin over it?
Yeah. So there's a different ways. We can do skin, we can do bands. There's a few ways it can be.
Yeah, would you do it on the inside or the outside?
Outside.
Okay.
Yep. The other option is to add shell courses. So we would take the existing tank, jack it up into the air, and add new shell courses on the bottom. And when we would add thicker shell courses on the bottom. So it's basically alternative 1 plus adding 2 shell courses, and that's a $6.4 million project. Now alternatives 4 and 5 are kind of the perfect world. Unlimited resources, we would probably replace the reservoir because you would have a brand new tank, another 50-year life easily, and you wouldn't have to worry about all the issues that we're talking about. And there's two common tank types. There's a pre-stressed concrete tank. That's an $8.2 million tank. And it's $8.2 million at capital construction costs, the initial capital construction costs, but it has much lower long-term O&M. There's very little O&M required for a concrete tank. You don't have to recoat it. You don't have to inspect it as much. So the life cycle costs for a pre-stressed concrete tank is actually much less than if you were to do a brand new steel tank. If we were to do a brand new 7.5 million gallon steel tank, we're looking at about $6 million. So those are the 2 replacement options that we wanted to compare the rehab options against. So our recommendation is, well, first off, for the first 3 recommendations, I've talked about those improvements that we would want to do for all 3. So one of them is the demolition and replacement of the existing roof, and we would, in our research, we found that installing a new aluminum roof would actually be the most cost effective. And there's a picture of an example aluminum roof and what it would look like, and you can see it has a much higher profile. It's more of like a dome. And if we were to go with the most economical aluminum roof, it would actually be about a 33-foot tall dome. And the aluminum roof basically, it minimizes future maintenance because aluminum is a material that does not need to be coated. So we would not have to maintain the coating in the future.
Do you happen to know which type of aluminum? Because I know certain types of it is actually toxic. Once water hits it and sits there for a long period of time, it becomes toxic. So are you going more towards the 70, 75 like aircraft? So
That's a
it's
good
strong enough to
question.
actually take any chemical, any water, any moisture, anything on it?
That's a good question. I don't know exactly the type, but I do know that the aluminum roof that has been used, it's a very widely used roof type for water tanks.
Yeah.
So my guess is it's a non-issue, but I don't know the specifics of the aluminum.
Is there any way you can find out
Yeah.
the actual, because there's 75 different types of it, so
Yeah,
whichever one, you've got your real miles, which is soft like butter, all the way up to harder than steel.
yeah, we could definitely find out. We can definitely get that information.
All right.
Okay. So the roof profile would basically be, for the most economical, 33 feet tall in the middle. So you can imagine the existing Derrick Reservoir is 40 feet tall. We're adding another 33 feet on top of it, and that's kind of a worst case height. It could be minimized to possibly as low as 15 feet of additional roof height, but that actually would cost more. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it would cost more because they would have to make that roof stronger. When they can make it taller, they can utilize that dome structure features a little more and actually go with a less roof material to be able to build that roof. So there's options there that may cost more if the height was an issue, but it would still probably be the most economical roof type if we were to replace the roof. So we also have some safety upgrades that we recommend. This was kind of a smaller portion of those $1 million figures. The new ladders, new current fall protection systems just for when divers or staff need to enter the tank for whatever reason. There's new protection systems that are available now. And then there's also appurtenances that we recommend. And the pipe connections and the overflow, there's some improvements that we would recommend there. Relatively speaking, those are small cost figures. The big ticket items are really the roof and the coating. That makes up about 80% of the total rehab costs. So it was just a little more detail on the pipe connections. I don't want to get too technical or too into the weeds, but basically the existing tank has these pipe connections that are very rigid. There's no flexibility to them at all. It's just pipe bolted onto the tank. So if there was an earthquake and there's significant deflection there, that pipe is just gonna shear off and crack, either the tank or the pipe. So, obviously we don't wanna see that happen. That would be a major repair that would be needed. That would take that reservoir out of service for a good amount of time. So what we recommend is adding flexible joints, and this is common in today's tank design. You basically add a flexible connection. There's two example types that I have on this slide in the bottom right, and we would basically just add that to every connection and redo the piping so it can fit these flex couplings.
What's the life of that with hard water?
The life of those probably past our lifetime. I mean, most of that is all plastic and rubber material.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not going to wear. It's not going to rust or anything. So we recommend, working with Sean and the water staff. We recommend alternative one, and here's a few reasons why. Obviously, the lowest cost alternative by a lot, right? It was the 3.2 million versus the others that were 4 or 5 million. It also, now one thing that we would need to do is reduce the operating level down to 29 feet. But we've done some previous analysis on the system, looking at the city's storage, and we believe that the city can live with 29 feet of storage, that volume would be adequate. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we feel like, that would not be an issue. And just, visually showing you what that means, the water level would basically just drop down 6 feet. So The one thing that we do want to highlight is that we would keep the overflow at 35 feet. So right now it's at 40 feet. We would recommend reducing that down to 35 because we do feel like it's unsafe to operate the reservoir above that. And I did mention that, you know, the reservoir is stressed when the water level, overstressed when the water level is above 29 feet. But there's going to be times where you might be in a drastic drought situation, right? I'm sure there's been times close to that this year even. And if the city decides, you know, the water is more important than the risk of the tank failing, then the city can decide to take that risk and to operate the reservoir higher to have more water on hand. And you know, you wouldn't operate above 29 feet all the time. You know, when you don't need the water, there's no point. But if there was an emergency situation where it was absolutely needed, then maybe for a short duration, it's worth taking that risk just to ensure we don't run out of water. So,
Where does the overflow water go?
I think there's an outlet that just discharges somewhere around the tank. I'm not exactly sure where.
Just on the ground outside?
Yeah. And yeah, so by reducing the water level, it would alleviate the overstressing issue and also the tank freeboard issue, which is a requirement in water tanks.
I got a question for Sean real quick. If the water line goes down, that 6 foot that's not there anymore, how many days does that put us with water before we're out of water? With that extra 6 feet not gonna be there?
Not very much. I think we rely on the storage tank for days of water. We're in a much bigger situation in terms of water shortage than just hoping that we get water turned back on in, say, a day or two. I don't know offhand exactly what that equates to, but we've had a lot of conversations back and forth about the water level. And I mean, this tank's been operating at 30 plus feet for 50 years. So, you know, basically at this point, we're looking at current standards for, you know, the structural integrity of the tank and whether it can withstand it. It's shown that it can for 50 years, you know, knock on wood. But we understand that we can operate at 29 feet. I know there's some circumstances as to why we've operated at higher levels. We don't necessarily need to go at those levels.
Right.
But if we did have some type of emergency situation, we would be able to bring that water level up.
Yeah. Well, once it drops, it recirculates back into it, right? It fills it back up.
It depends on how the operators operate the system as to how much water is pushed into that tank and how much they want to keep
So
it.
usually during the workday then.
Yeah, or yeah, whenever the operators have control of the levels of the tank and watch the levels of the tank. But in terms of the operational capacity, I don't think we feel like we can, especially with the analysis that MK has done in the past, knowing that we have to take this tank completely down, we're looking at being able to operate and still provide water to the entire city without this tank even online.
Yeah. Well, I know
So
there
it's-
for a while, quite a few years ago, they were actually running it at 30 foot. It was running at 30 foot.
And it can.
Yeah.
And it can. I think that we can continue to provide water. It's just that emergency storage.
Yeah.
But we've had a lot of conversations about, you know, if we're in a situation where like we only have 2 days of water or 3 days of water.
They won't be able to do that until it's actually getting worked on, right? Because if they drain it down like that, then the sediment and everything that's sitting on the top is actually going to drop with that open space. As
Not
it
necessarily.
dries
It can.
with the
I
heat.
mean, the tank level fluctuates a lot. I mean, it's not always operating at that level. And we see in one night, especially during the height of the summer when it was 100 and plus degrees, we saw the tank drop 10 feet in one night.
Yeah.
So
Because usually there's water quality issues if you just always keep the tank
Yeah.
full.
Oh, yeah.
So
Bacteria
we
and
wanna try to
everything else,
turn it
yeah.
over. And just for some numbers to keep in mind, so we performed a hydraulic analysis last year. I was just bringing up the report. So the city's average demand in one day is 3.5 million gallons. So that's the city's like annual throughout the entire year.
Oh.
That's the average day demand. If that's 6 feet of storage is about like 1.5 million gallons. So it's not, it would basically be, you know,
So we're
third of the day.
still good then, even if we stay right where we're at and drop that level, we're still good then.
Yeah.
We still got a
Yeah.
buffer. Okay.
Yeah, that's only one tank. We have Calaveras and we also have Palmer as well. And so we looked at that to see what our capacity is. But we had those conversations about, if we have a situation where we're going to be out of water, I mean, if we're going to be out of water for more than like 2-3 days, or at least we're not making water at the water treatment plant, we have a bigger situation than just how many 2 days of water availability. So we're already in a contingency planning at that point.
And there's already a bypass, right? Or are they going to be putting one in?
The valves that the council authorized the last meeting, those are the valves that we're replacing, because I don't know if the bypass has ever been exercised or used. We've tried to do a little bit of backtracking with previous operators to see if they've been.
It was actually used. It was probably about 7 years ago when they actually had a leak in the line between the two valves. They were actually able to reroute it a third valve and actually go around the tank and back into town. So they do have a way out there. It's just the valves are no good.
Yeah, and so we're going to be replacing all of those valves in preparation, and most likely this winter we will be planning a shutdown of the tank full, but we'll be bypassing the tank to test the theory of Henry and his team to make sure we can do it in wintertime and transition into summer months, because our goal is, as well, actually it's up right there, is kind of what our anticipated schedule for this is, to really know that we're going to start as soon as we can, get this project ready to go, so we can have this project start in the fall. And because it could take, we're talking 6 months, potentially 5 to 6 months for this tank to be down. So we really want to make sure that we're ready to be able to handle the demands, continue conservation with the community, but also handle the demands and bypass.
Is that going to change as that's happening? Is that going to change the staff that needs to be on duty during those few months?
That's part of our contingency plans, and we've got a lot of planning ahead of us as we start developing up our approach to having this tank down. So starting from pretty much now till we get this plan and we get the project going, we're going to continue to plan our contingency planning and how we're going to staff and make sure we're monitoring it. We're putting pressure regulators on a lot of these valves. We're actually looking at telemetry on these valves, which is basically the communication back to the plant, so we can see what the system's doing more than what we can see now.
Yeah.
So Larry and some of the operators, they're working with some of the companies to look at what kind of telemetry we can have as well on some of these valves to make sure we can communicate with bypasses, as well as making sure we know what the pressures are, what the flows are, to make sure that we're not having impacts in the city, and monitoring, all different areas of
Is there
town.
any way that on some of the valve sections where you can put cathodics testing, so they can actually test the water on the line?
I think there's already several locations where they can take samples just to be able to take water quality.
Yeah, I know there is in town, but on the line itself, is there a cathodics that can actually keep track of the line if something happens? Besides the pressure falling from over there and over there, they have a way to tell on the computer.
I don't think so.
I don't think so, no.
So that'd be something to check into with the cathodics. A lot easier to keep track of that way.
Okay.
Is this all funding that's going to be through our bonds that we passed recently?
What was that, Adam?
Is this all funding that's going to be through the bonds that we passed recently?
That is the expectation. That is a little, this project cost is a little bit higher than what we anticipated as we went into a more in-depth analysis. As when we started developing up, knowing that we were having to raise water rates and going through the bond implementation, that we looked at cost estimates, we talked to tank companies to kind of get a good indication. But based on after doing a full analysis of the roof and doing a full analysis of the tank, we found that there are some additional costs associated with this. So, obviously when we come to the council talking about ARPA funds and talking about projects, this is going to be a priority project for the bond, but it potentially might help offset some of the additional projects that we are still looking to try to implement on in the bond as well.
All right. So what is the total amount? I mean, I saw some of the figures that were posted. What is it that we're looking at? Are you asking council how much we want to go? Because I was very close to securing about $5 million in funding for this project. As we saw, Hurtado's bill failed in the assembly because they wanted to change the funding for it. So she had to pull it. However, it's coming back again next year. And I think that I can secure the funding for at least $5 million of this. But I don't know if I'll be here next year. Somebody needs to take up that torch. But what is it that you're asking from council right now?
So we're basically, I mean, the project is a project on the bond, and what will happen is that the bond, we're looking to prioritize this project because this is the big ticket project as part of the bond implementation, is to move forward with this project. And really tonight we're looking for council's concurrence on alternative one approach so we can start the design and start moving forward with the project. It will be funded out of the bond is what our expectation is. And then we reprioritize the remaining funding for other projects in the water fund. In the bond. I'm not quite
And the
sure.
alternative fund, sorry.
Go ahead.
Alternative fund is how much? Alternative one fund is how much?
About 3.2 million.
3.2 million. Okay.
Yeah. And we've got about
I'll
two.
continue to press that then.
And we have about 2.5, I think, secured in the bond, plus contingency money. And there's another project that we are probably not going to be able to do due to some easement issues, which was the paving of the Palmer Road out to the water plant. And so with that funding already identified in the bond, it would offset. We've reduced the contingency to about 10% on this project due to the fact that we're looking at, coatings, and we know a lot about the tank as well, that we don't need to look at a 30%, contingency on this project because we know so much about the tank because we've done a lot of upfront analysis of the tank. So our recommendation is to move forward with this project. I think this is the priority project that needs to be addressed. It's a 50-year-old tank. And so if we're moving forward, if there's other projects we want to move forward with ARPA funds and then prioritize the rest of the bond money, we still have that funding left over. It's just prioritizing the remaining projects.
Okay. Well, okay. So I get it. So I'm all in favor of moving forward with this. I just think I can secure the funding for it once the time comes when the legislature comes back in session.
So the only benefit would be is if funding does come available, if they're willing to reimburse us for all the expenses, that would be a big caveat to this.
Okay, I'll see what I can do.
Okay, basically you want us to, if we want to approve
Yeah,
number one.
so what we're looking from the council is, one, we want you guys to recognize that in this alternative, we're going to be looking at an operating height of 29 with the understanding that at times of drought or times that we have maybe a shutdown with Westlands for maintenance, the tank level may be higher than the 29 feet. Also with the roof, it's a different roof construction. So we're looking at, I don't know if it's going to really be aesthetically impacted. The tank's quite a distance from the city. So you are going to see it, but I don't think it's going to be a significant effect. But this is a more cost-effective approach. And I think it surprised everybody when we started talking, or when Henry and his team started talking with different companies, that this was originally assumed to be the more expensive approach. And to their surprise, it was actually the more cost-effective approach. So there will be a little bit more, there'll be a different aesthetic to the tank when it's completed as well. But we feel like, this is the most responsible approach. To spend $3.2 million, we know and recognize we only have limited funding availability to do these other projects with the water fund and with the water system. And so we feel like this is almost, it's practically going to give us a brand new tank. The steel's in good shape, and that's the bare bones of the tank. We're putting a new roof and new coatings on it. So it's pretty much going to outlive, probably outlive most of us.
What size are our other tanks? Do you know how high our other tanks are?
I think I might have
I don't
that
know
on
if I have
hand.
the height of the other tanks.
And what the operating level is on those?
Palmer's new. Palmer's a newer
brand new.
tank. I don't know what the operating level is. It's a lot smaller. the diameter I think the radius is the
I know
is the same.
this is our biggest.
This is a huge tank compared to
Right.
Palmer and Calaveras.
Yeah, the Calaveras is 5 million gallons, and Palmer is 2.8 each,
And how many gallons is this with the
7.5.
with the, how about the 30 foot? How much would it be with 30 foot?
Oh, well, that roof height, we wouldn't be using any of that volume.
Oh, I know that.
Oh, he's talking about the 30,
Just-
29
oh,
foot
we're going
operating
up to
height.
30
Saying
feet.
we would have about 5, it's like around 5.5.
Okay.
And we've shown through the analysis that MKN did last year that it is plenty of capacity for us even in the
Right.
summertime. But as we grow, you know, there's things to look at as down the road. But I think we've got a lot of growth in that tank, even at the operating water height at 30 feet.
Okay.
So we're just kind of getting concurrence from the council. We wanted to share the report with you to kind of understand, you know, the condition of this tank. It's been a long time. I know there's been inspections in the past done on this tank, but we're ready to move forward. The next step will probably bring back some design services with MKN to start moving forward with designing the tank. And our goal is to have this ready to go, what they call shovel ready, by hopefully summer, so we can bid this project and be ready for winter. And then we'll advise the council when we move forward with shutdowns and when we run this system in bypass.
Okay, would somebody like to entertain a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve this,
To go
to move forward with it.
for their recommendation?
Yeah, the recommendation for that's just the repair, right? That's not a new, and what's the guarantee on the actual repair?
The life, like what a life we could expect.
Yeah, if it, how many years is it before if something leaks, something peels, pops a hole, anything that
Yeah.
it's still covered under warranty?
Well, that's the thing. So the coating will have, all the work will just fall under like a typical 1-year construction warranty. The coatings might have a slightly longer one, but you know, all the other work would basically just be a 1-year warranty. I mean, all the improvements we would expect to last another 30 to 50 years, but there's no warranty to it.
All right.
Okay, it's been moved that we do the recommendation from staff. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Horn,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Singleton,
Aye.
Councilman Atkinson,
Aye.
Mayor Ramsey.
I also vote aye. Going through this, did we do the consent calendar? We did the consent calendar, we didn't. I just had a blank on there and said, did I forget to do that one? Okay. Okay, next we have announcements. City manager?
Thank you. I just wanted to let everyone know that Tuesday of next week, September 21st, we are hosting a joint workshop between the city and the Kunda Chamber of Commerce at Cafe 101 at noon for any small business owners who have questions about the small business assistance application or if they need assistance filling it out. We do still have funding for utility assistance available and mortgage assistance. Those applications are available online or they can be picked up at the front counter. Some of the questions on the application are a little bit confusing, so we did host a few workshops. But if anyone needs help or they want to schedule an individual appointment to come in to complete those, they can give me a call. My number is 935-1533, extension 111, and we can do that together. And then I think a lot of people are getting confused because they're coming to the city seeking rental assistance, and we don't have rental assistance. We only have mortgage assistance and utility assistance. There is rental assistance available, but it's through the nonprofit that's on the corner here in the old courthouse. I believe it's every Tuesday morning from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., I believe is the time. But if anyone needs rental assistance, they can go there to apply.
Okay, council members' announcements? Do you have any? Okay. Mayor's announcements, I have none except for the part of the council is going to the conference up in Sacramento this next week. I think there's 4 of us going, and we have a couple of staff going also. I think that's it, isn't it, on that? That's all I have. Is there any future agenda items? Okay. The only thing I know that we're having problems with a lot of alleys right now. And I want to see if we can have our code enforcer start going on, looking at that and seeing what we can actually do. And because we want to make sure we have the right rules to get this cleaned up, because a lot of these places have been, they've been too long. I mean, because we haven't had code enforcement, but they've been too long, and they're really bad on some of the areas in town, and it's all over town. It's not just one area, because we've already been seeing a couple of them, and we got some in the line right now trying to get them cleaned up. So I'd like to see something on that. We could maybe bring it back, and just to see if we could check our ordinances and see if we have to tweak them at all.
I got a dumb question. Is there any way we can get the code enforcement to come in on one of the meetings so he can actually introduce himself to everybody?
We can. He is an hourly employee, not a management employee, so he won't generally attend city council meetings, but I can schedule him to come in to introduce him to the public at one of the meetings.
Okay, I guess that's all the future agenda items. We have no closed session. There's nothing to report. Anybody have anything? Okay. Thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.